All right, we are back, and now we're talking about the stomach. So on the stomach, there are 4 parts I want you to know. The cardiac region, right here where the esophagus comes in. Up here, the fundus, and then the body, and then down here, the pylorus, where you'll find the pyloric sphincter. Something to note in the stomach is rugae. Rugae, when the stomach is relaxed, it's normally about maybe the size of your fist. And this rugae, or these wrinkles, are just extra stuff, so when you put food in your stomach, it can swell up. And so it doesn't have transitional epithelium in your stomach. You're going to have simple columnar, and this rugae helps it expand instead of having that transitional epithelium. And if you wondered how a bariatric surgery or a gastric bypass work, they do this. This is one. I think there's like 4 different types of bypass surgeries. This is one where they keep a little stomach pouch and then connect it directly into the jejunum, bypassing the duodenum. All right, in your stomach, it's basically a capitance organ. So it's really there just to store your food. But while it is storing the food, it is going to be mechanically breaking it down, and it's going to be chemically breaking it down. But most of that digestion doesn't happen in the stomach. The stomach's mostly for storing the food. And so if you look at the stomach, we're going to have a couple different layers, just like we saw in our other alimentary canals cross-section. So you're going to have your mucosa, your submucosa, the muscularis. In the stomach, you're going to have 3 layers. So you have an oblique layer, one that pushes down at a 45. So you have your circular, you have your longitudinal, and then you have a oblique, so you can push stuff down to that pyloric region. The first thing I want to talk about here is going to be your mucus cells and your regenerative cells. So if you look at how the stomach is set up here, you can see our gastric pits in this image. Here they are in this image, and they're lined with these mucus cells. These mucus cells produce mucus, and that mucus helps to protect these cells from the hydrochloric acid that is being produced too. And so this mucus layer helps to create like a buffer between the hydrochloric acid and the cells of your stomach, so your cells of your stomach don't eat themselves. We also have stem cells that can replace any cells that get damaged. As we move down, 2 of our important gland cells are going to be your parietal cells and your Chief cells. So these parietal cells are the ones that are secreting hydrochloric acid. All right. They also release intrinsic factor and ghrelin. Ghrelin is an appetite stimulant. And so when the stomach is empty, these parietal cells can secrete ghrelin and stimulate your hunger, which is really cool. The Chief cells, those are going to be the ones that you find the most of. All these dark purple cells in here are Chief cells. This is going to be the lumen of one of those glands. The parietal cells are these bigger, lighter pink cells where you can see that nucleus really well. These Chief cells are the ones that are going to be making gastric lipase and pepsinogen. Pepsinogen is a precursor to pepsin. So as pepsinogen gets released from these Chief cells, it comes into contact with hydrochloric acid, and that hydrochloric acid cleaves off a piece of pepsinogen and turns it into the active form pepsin. And pepsin breaks down proteins. So pepsinogen is something that we call a pre-enzyme, and so it's not ready yet until it comes out, and then it gets cleaved, and then it's ready. Because you don't want to be breaking down the proteins in your own cell. That'd be bad. All right. And then the last one are these enteroendocrine glands. There's a whole bunch of different types of them. They secrete a bunch of hormones and paracrine messengers. And so if you look down here in this picture, they're going to be down here at the bottom, while your chief cells are here, your parietal cells are up here, and then all these mucus cells. All right. So that is the stomach. What happens when food doesn't go this way, and instead it goes this way? Well, that's vomiting, right? It's forceful ejection of the chyme. What the chyme is when you have that bolus, and as soon as it mixes with the stomach acid and the fluids in the stomach, it turns to this stuff called the chyme. So it's no longer held together by that mucus, and it's a lot looser, a lot wetter. So, I mean, if you've ever thrown up, you know that vomit is pretty wet, right? That would be the chyme. You have a center in the medulla oblongata. If you remember my great drawing of that brain, the medulla oblongata is going to be down here in the brainstem, and it has this emetric center, or the center for vomiting. What can cause you to vomit? Well, you can eat too much, your stomach can get way too full, or the duodenum can get too full, and that can stimulate the medulla to trigger the center and you vomit. If you have chemical irritants, such as too much alcohol, it can cause you to throw up. Or food poisoning, if you get bacterial toxins, that can cause you to throw up. Visceral trauma, especially down into the pelvic organs. So if something like, maybe if somebody like punches you really hard in the kidney or something, that can cause it. I mean, any intense pain, if you get kicked in the testicles hard enough, that can cause you to throw up. And then, of course, psychological, if some people see somebody throw up, and that will make them throw up because their brain said, we should throw up, apparently. And then sensory stimuli. So maybe you didn't see somebody throw up, but you smelled it. That's gross. That could also cause you to throw up. Maybe you've smelled something really bad and caused you to gag, right? That gag where you go, ugh. That's something called retching. Most of your vomiting is preceded by retching. Something that you don't see is babies don't really retch. So instead they do something called projectile vomit. So if you don't retch, that type of vomit is called projectile vomiting. So there's no whoop. Starting it off. Alright. So in the stomach, you really don't absorb a lot of nutrients. You don't absorb a lot of stuff in the stomach. It has to get broken down completely, and that happens in the small intestine. So you really don't get a lot of absorption in the stomach. Some things you do absorb is aspirin. Aspirin can cause ulcers in your stomach through its absorption. And so you gotta be careful with how much aspirin you take, especially if you already have stomach ulcers. It can make it much worse. And then any of your lipid-soluble drugs can be absorbed here. Alcohol, however, does not get absorbed in the stomach. So how does that affect your rate of intoxication? If you have a fuller stomach, it's going to dilute that alcohol. And depending on the rest of the pathway, if you have food in the small intestine, food does not leave the stomach until food in that small intestine has cleared. And so a full stomach decreases your rate of intoxication. So what are some of the glandular cells? Two of the big ones: chief cells, parietal cells. Parietal cells making hydrochloric acid, chief cells making pepsinogen. And then we will continue on with the liver. So the liver is one of your major accessory organs of the digestive system. You have 4 lobes of the liver: right, left, quadrate, right, 4, and then caudate, the one that looks like a tail, so it comes down the back. Cauda means tail. When you look at the liver, you will see these things called a portal triad. where you're going to have an artery, a vein, and a bile ductile, or bile duct. So here again, right, left, caudate, looking here at a slide, you can see that central canal, and when you come out over here is where you can see that triad. What does the liver do for digestion? Well, it makes bile. It makes bile and bile salts. And what bile and bile salts do is they emulsify fats. And so if you look at a fat, they end up being these little droplets, or these big droplets. And when you put those bile salts in there, it makes those droplets smaller. And so they're easier to break down with other lipases. So bile is really important in the digestion of fat. And when the liver, it's constantly making bile. When it makes enough bile, that bile gets stored in the gallbladder. So the gallbladder does not make bile. It only stores it, right? And before it gets concentrated, it's normally a yellowish color. When it does get concentrated, then it kind of turns into this greenish color. The main pigment in bile is bilirubin. Bilirubin is derived from hemoglobin. We talked about hemoglobin before, right? Where do you find hemoglobin? Mostly in your red blood cells. And so this molecule that we find in our red blood cells is important in your bile, which is really cool. Think about what color bruises are, right? They kind of go from bluish purple to green over time. Gallbladder is green. We have intestinal bacteria that break down that bile, that bilirubin, into something called urobilinogen, and that causes it to become colorless. So it kind of goes from that green-yellow to nothing when it's in the intestines. And then we reabsorb it into the blood, so into these other veins and stuff. So it's all in the intestine right now, and it gets absorbed through those veins and then pumped through the system to the kidneys, where the kidney excretes it as urobilin. And that's what gives your pee its yellow color, is this urobilin that is made from the bilirubin urobilinogen. And then not all of it gets absorbed by the kidneys or gets reabsorbed into the blood circulation. Some of it stays in the intestines, and then it gets turned into cerobilin, and cerobilin is what makes your poop brown. So bile gives you brown poop. That's kind of cool. Some people have their gallbladders removed, right? Because of like gallstones or other issues. What color is their poop? It's brown because their liver makes bile. The gallbladder does not make bile. It only stores it. But people with severe cirrhosis, their livers aren't functioning. And so they might not be making bile. And if you look at their poop, it's white. And it has a lot of undigested fat in it. This is something called acholic feces, or this really fatty feces. And if they pooped in water, you could see like the oils and the fats like float to the top. Really gross. All right. So what does the liver contribute to digestion? Bile. We'll pick up with the small